If you've ever followed fatui lore analyses in the past, you've most likely seen the fascinating lore of the Polar Star. The story depicts a mysterious speaker rallying the others to instill a burning fury of loyalty towards the Tsaritsa's cause. And today, I want to dissect the potential hidden meanings in this speech, as well as how they relate to each of the harbingers or how they correlate with the existing knowledge we know so far. Disclaimer, this is all just a theory and speculation, and most likely, when I start delineating their connections to harbingers that have little to no current lore background, I'm going to be relying on a lot of guesswork. So this is going to be less of a definitive video with actual concrete evidence and conclusions, and more so a video to start off the conversation so that you guys can also make your own connections. You might be able to find more clues that I'm not aware of, and it'll be fun to Frankenstein everything together in the comments. So in the same reins, feel free to also dispute this analysis, considering that again, this is all just speculative guesswork at best. Nothing here is indicative of the final product. So, as we begin, let us go with the speech itself. I was once a wounded wolf, betrayed by the whole world. But we shall create a new world, one in which no one shall ever be forsaken. Dressed in flawless garments as radiant as the midday, we came to the land of silver snow, and sounded the clarion of Her Majesty's greatness. Oft have we walked in the moonless night. Oft have we trudged through the gilded sands. Oft have we felt piercing enmity in the darkness, and oft have we dreamed of lovers in distant hometowns. But the pale flame yet burns in our breasts. O harbingers, scintillating as polar stars, guide us ever onward, tireless. If your dreams find no acceptance, if you nurse wounds that will not fade, if you end each day discontent, if you burn with fury against false promises, lift up your eyes to the white, glimmering stars, for that is our banner. Join our ranks, let our marching boots shake the earth like thunder. You who will march with us towards the pole star of the white night. Come, we shall never abandon you. You who will walk with us into the land of darkness. Come, we shall create a new world together. Know that the destruction of all precedes the birth of a new order. At devastation's end, we will greet a stainless dawn. So, let's begin. Just for some background on what a polar star, or a pole star even is, it refers to a star that is nearly aligned with the axis of a rotating astronomical body. It's a star that when you look at it remains still in the sky, despite everything else moving behind it. So in the context of this speech, the will of the fatui is constant through the tribulations and pain of the world. And it's by the harbingers and the Tsaritsa's will that the fatui will march towards the promised destination under the pole star of the night. So, moving on to the speech. The first question is, who is the one speaking? Are they a harbinger or are they the Tsaritsa? Well, judging from context clues, this speech is harking the harbingers and the Tsaritsa is mentioned as Her Majesty. So I have two suggestions. My first suggestion is that this is one of the higher ranking harbingers. We can cross out a lot of them just by going through the list of those that are even willing to give a speech to such a crowd, just from personality quirks that we've seen so far. The idea of Sandrana giving this speech is kind of hilarious in my head, but anyway. There's also a possibility that this isn't a harbinger, but a high-ranking fatui agent instead. Consider that it's calling out to the harbingers as though they are paragons, and then referring to them as they who will march us towards the pole star of the white night, and that we shall never abandon you. It's also calling out for the harbingers to guide them onward, which only solidifies that this isn't being said by someone of their equal caliber. In all honesty, this reminds me of how the Abyss Lector calls out towards the Abyss. We also need to respect that this speech is filled with metaphors instead of being completely literal. But regardless of that, whoever the speaker is, they talk about betrayal and being forsaken. While consolidating with the current lore, the harbinger with the strongest form of betrayal in their lore is Scaramouche, but I don't think he's the kind of harbinger that would deliver this kind of speech. I was considering if this was Piero, but Piero wasn't necessarily forsaken or had the strongest abandonment subtexts. No, my theory is that if the speaker is a harbinger here, then it could have been Pulcinella. Firstly, from what we know about his personality as being a form of careful counselor to most of the harbingers as opposed to the director's more distant approach. The problem with this connection though is that wolf-like correlations aren't the strongest with Pulcinella, literally or metaphorically, or with any other harbingers at the moment, even if it is symbolism. So the best guess that we have so far is that this is a high-ranking fatui agent, but not a harbinger. So then we move on to the next portion. The speaker says that they came to the land of silver snow to sound the clarion of Her Majesty's greatness, dressed in flawless garments as radiant as the midday. So what I'm curious about is why this speech has the implication that the speaker, and by extension, the harbingers, weren't from the land of silver snow. I assume that this land of silver snow could be Snezhnaya, but I'm almost inclined to believe against this theory. Let's explore this possibility. First, the thought that the speaker isn't from Snezhnaya. This isn't completely out of the question, in all honesty. We know that non-Snezhnayans can be Fatui members, and a lot of the harbingers are actually non-Snezhnayan, and that the Fatui are open to recruitments even when they're on foreign land. As suspicious as it sounds, there seems to be an air of unity that the Fatui are trying to accomplish with their agenda, whether for good or for evil. The second alternative is that the land of silver snow isn't Snezhnaya, but another unknown ice land entirely. Maybe like Dragonspine, but I doubt that's the case. This gives us the precedence that the Fatui are planning a wide-scale invasion somewhere in the name of creating the New World Order. A good example of a foot soldier discussing the surface plans of the Fatui is when you talk to Katarina in the world quest Lost in a Foreign Land. She has a final statement when you talk to her, and she mentions something known as the Final Battle. It's no surprise that outsiders fail to understand the cause of the Fatui, but when we aren't talking about what we pursue or which side we are on, we are just a bunch of ordinary people. Besides, all our agendas and deeds are just preparatory work for the final battle. Yes, in the end, all of us shall face a common enemy and the inescapable long night. Everyone in Snezhnaya has been thusly warned. I'm going to be continuing this train of thought later, but as his speech continues with specific examples, this is where the lore gets interesting. My speculation is that each line, from a meta-narrative standpoint, corresponds to one harbinger's backstory. And with that, let's theorize. Oft have we walked in the moonless night could be a correlation to Columbina's theory of being a Seelie. The Seelie, as an ancient race of bygone beautiful and wise creatures, also had connections to the three moon sisters of the lunar palace, Arya, Sonnet, and Canon, or at least the ancestor of the Seelie did when they married the traveler from afar. The moonless night could be allegorical to the fact that two of the three sisters perished after the disaster that fell upon the Seelies. The lunar palace hosted the marriage, but 30 days later, there was a calamity that pitted the sisters against each other, which eventually led to their deaths. Which is why for this one, I'm theorizing that this is for Columbina's lore. Or on the other hand, this could also be for Piero. The moonless night could be an allegory to the crimson moon during the fall of Conria. The next line with trudging through the Gilded Sands could be a strong description for Dottoro's fascination with the desert during his time in the academia. Gilded Sands has been a consistent description of Sumeru's deserts, gilded oftentimes being referred to the gilded dreams of the desert folk and the ancient civilizations of Sumeru. Dottore, as Zandik, was fascinated by the ancient desert city of Gurabad. However, he was also dispelled from the academia after all the questionable transgressions and suspicions against his character. While it was never confirmed if he was brought to the desert as part of his expulsion, that wouldn't be too far of a guess. We also know that Dottore, according to his lore in the Pale Flame set, was driven out with pitchforks. The third line of feeling piercing enmity in the dark is vaguer, but my guess for this one is Tartaglia. While he is definitely not the only harbinger that has been to the abyss, he's the one whose lore is more integrated to his experience down there. This line could allude to the 3 months, or 3 Tevatian days, that he's been training in the abyss with Skirk. This experience was what forged a majority of his power. The fourth line of dreaming of lovers in distant hometowns would be strongest with Senora, considering her lover Rostam partaking in the expedition against the abyss while she was in the Sumeru Academia. The next line mentions the pale flame burning in our breasts, a reference to the name of the Fatui artifact set. Then we get to the line heralding the harbingers. The speaker calls them the polar stars, tireless guides as scintillating as ever. This is why I believe that the speaker isn't a harbinger themselves, considering that if this was an equal, then he would have said something along the lines of let us guide them onwards, but never a guidance to each other. That would be too egotistical of a motivational speech in my opinion. Nevertheless, I also want to continue that idea that this is a declaration of war kind of speech, which we continue with more potential allegories to the harbingers. The next few lines are much vaguer, and because we don't know much about the other harbingers' lore, I can only really guess. If your dreams find no acceptance, feels like it would be for Scaramouche, considering his connection to dreaming and his dedicated artifact set being known as the Husk of Opulent Dreams. But the word dream could also mean ambition, which is also very true for him, a character whose goals and ambitions were constantly thrown away or belittled by the world. That's also very possible. Remember, one of his dreams in the past was to have a heart, or at the very least, the mimicry of it through the gnosis. The second one is if you nurse wounds that will not fade, such as scars or disembodiment. The closest one I can think of for this is Capitano, who literally has a mask, or Senora that had her face horribly marked and scorched during her era as the Crimson Witch of Flames. Your guess is as good as mine though, because this is a very vague line. If you end each day discontent, if you burn with fury against false promises, reminds me of Pantalones' moment of cessation. I quote, "Perhaps he lusted for money because he had once been destitute, or perhaps the fact that the gods had never looked upon him with favor ignited a burning desire for resistance inside him." That or it could be for another character altogether, considering we don't know much lore about Arlecchino, Sandrona, and Columbina. The speech ends with a riveting rally cry regarding the marching into the land of darkness. Now, what this entails is unknown. The Fatui constantly say that they will create a new world order together, something that has been repeated by characters like Tartaglia and Piero. The old world shall burn away in favor of the new, and that they will right the wrongs of this world. The Sarita's creed is to instill a rebellion for those that have been wronged in the past. According to the funerary mask, perhaps it is fair to say that only those who possess an obsession close to, or even exceeding the level of delusion, might be willing to join this group that so rebels against the heavenly principles, binding the remaining days to their delusions, and burning as brightly as stars. What I want to understand, though, is why. The speaker says that they will walk into the land of darkness, but it's never confirmed if this is the land of Conria or if they mean the entirety of Tivat, or even the land of Celestia in all honesty. Darkness could be seen as both literal or it could be metaphorical, as in tainted by sin, a land that is broken by the darkness of what happened to it. The Polar Star lore, in my opinion, is one of the pieces of lore that is so integral to the future of Genshin Impact, for the sole reason that I really think there's just something hidden down here. But anyway, that's it for me today. A shorter video on the Harbingers, since this was a piece of lore that I've always wanted to analyze, and this weapon has a lot of symbolisms that are just so vibrantly written. Anyway, my name is Aster, and thank you for chilling with me. If you've ever followed Fatui